Okay. All right, we are recording. Okay, so you can see these blocks. You can see the low relief surface when you get light across it. It's not really that deep. It's deep enough that when you print, you roll ink over the surface, and then you put the paper down. And when you're printing by hand, I use one of these, which is a Shimoji. It's just a bamboo rice paddle. I've used it for about 30 years. That's why it's so nice and shiny and smooth on the bottom. You want something that has a hard surface that's smooth. So when you're put the paper down on the block, you're rubbing the back like that. I don't think we're going to get to printing tonight, but I'll demonstrate printing next week for sure. Okay, so woodcut, 2 different blocks, 2 different colors. We're going to do just something, I would recommend something simpler to begin. This is just a simple linoleum cut of a clunky looking cube sinking into the ground or something. Something like a demonstration like this, where you can, when you print, it's either black or white if you're printing with black ink. And so creating the appearance of gray really is all in the cutting. And so this is just using the different tools. Put that over there. This is a little baby Baron. I don't find that a Baron is a Japanese tool for printing, kind of like I use this the Shimoji or wooden, like a wooden spoon. These are tend not to give you that much, they're not as hard. They don't give you as much force. The Shimoji, the Baron was developed for Japanese printmaking where they use water-based inks. And that transfers to the paper much more easily than the oil-based inks, which I prefer for what I'm doing. Okay, tools. You can buy tools that have different kinds of handles. So the speedball, these speedball linoleum cutters are pretty good for the price. And actually, for the price, they're very good. I use this one. This has the smallest little speedball nib. And if you loosen the collar, pull that out, they usually come with others. This is like a bigger, kind of like a U-gouge. You can see the difference in the size of them. I like this little tiny guy for small, for like fine cuts. For a lot of the other stuff, there we go. Hold that, turn the handle, and tighten it. Now I just gave myself a bigger, larger gouge. So gouges are these like a V gouge and a U gouge. The V gouge, the shape of it, of course, is a V, like the tool. The end of the tool, there's the sharp end right there. And the U gouge will be some variation on a U shape. As you can probably tell, the V gouge will make a thinner line. The U gouge will make a wider line. And depending on the angle of the tool, if you hold it up high, a little bit higher, it'll dig deeper and make a broader mark. So that's something that in the first print, I would recommend that you just, if you need to familiarize yourself with the tools, that you might just take some of these tools. Now this is stained with ink. The linoleum I have is just like this battleship gray linoleum, which is good standard stuff to use. The mounted linoleum is also good. It's the same stuff as just like, the stuff that's mounted to like a piece of particle board. I find that this is a little bit easier to work with at home when I'm printing by hand. So this is a really thin little gouge. You can see make that a little bit bigger. If this starts to slide around on me, I'm neglected to, I can't remember if I put this on the list. It's kind of like rubberized shelf liner. It makes it stick a little bit better. Okay, when I cut, I tend to stabilize it. I hold it kind of like that. Everybody will, I recommend that you experiment with ways to hold the tools to just, find a way that's most comfortable. I find that if you clutch it like it's a dagger, it's really hard to use. And even just like one-handed like that, it's harder to control. I stabilize it with my index finger of my left hand. I'm right-handed. And I've got it kind of like wedged in here. If I'm making parallel marks, I'll like go cut and then back up and then move it over. Kind of like that. This wider U gouge takes a bigger, like wider chunk out of it. And mostly, those are the two basic tools that I use are like a thinner, like a tool that makes a thinner mark and a tool that makes a wider mark, because that's, kind of what you need. Loosen this enough that you can get it. There's like a curving, like a loose curved plate in there. This has got to get underneath it. And hold it, turn it. There we go. Yeah, see this, I really like the number. This is like, I think the #1 size end, or like, gouge piece that they've got, which is, it works really, really well. There are other tools, knife and chisel. I don't use the knife and the chisel much, personally. Some people do. When we get to working, like cutting up, I'll show you how you would use these, but really the different size cutting ends, either like, U gouge, V gouge, or just like with the speedball cutters, the larger and smaller. I think this is actually like a little super tiny U gouge. No, it's kind of a V. Yeah. But economical. If you want to get a large, like a set of tools, any of these that have like a wooden handle, whether it's this just like a long handle like this or the mushroom shaped handle, usually I found that the tools that are worth buying, a set of 6 or 5 tools is in the range of $50. If they're less expensive than that, they tend to use cheaper steel, and that doesn't sharpen well. Now, if you have these, these tools, then you'll need a sharpening system. With the speedball cutters, you don't really need a sharpening a method to sharpen them, because you can buy more of them. But if you want to, I'll show you ways to do that. Okay, and anything else that can make a mark in the block. This is just like probably like a ceramic tool. It's just like a spike. If I make very deliberate, like these like punctures, you can see when I roll ink over this, ink is not going to get down in there, and I'll get these like 3 little white dots printing there. Okay, so tools, linoleum, whichever if you prefer. This wood that I have right here, I get this from a place in Oregon called McLean's, and it's called Shina plywood. It's a Japanese plywood that's really nice for woodcuts. Okay, told you about the shimoji. You'll see next week how the shimoji works and what the shimoji does. Speedball brayer. You need this for rolling ink onto the block. A palette knife, ink knife. I mean, really, it's a putty knife. I tend to prefer stiffer ones. If they're really bendy, they need to give you some resistance for when you're mixing up ink. Ink, any of like my preference for ink. So some working at home, it would be convenient to do to use a water-based ink, but the water-based inks dry up so fast that I really don't find them to be useful at all. There are inks that do clean up with soap and water, and they are resin-based inks. The Caligo is one brand. They're called Safe Wash inks, and the black ink, especially the color inks, I've used the color inks before, and they don't really clean up as well with soap and water. But the black ink, the Caligo, Caligo, that stuff cleans up really well with soap and water. I prefer to use oil-based inks. The pigmentation of the Caligo inks, it's just not quite as good as a regular oil-based ink. And the Speedball brand of oil-based ink is, it's not the greatest ink, but it works fine. I mean, it works fine, and it's inexpensive. And you can buy it in tubes that are not, that are relatively small. A lot of the inks that I normally buy, like Gamblin, there's a brand called Gamblin, they will not sell their inks, their printmaking inks in tubes. I don't know why. And so rather than buying a great big can, I would recommend that you get like the tube of Speedball. And what to ink on. on a piece of glass, of course. This is just a piece of single strength glass with duct tape around the edge, and I put it down on a piece of mat board. And if you're careful, this is not tempered glass, so it could, if I drop it, it would break, but hopefully it wouldn't, send glass everywhere. If you're concerned about breaking glass, hey, careful. If you're concerned about breaking the pallet, you could buy a piece of tempered glass that is, if you know you're going to do a lot of this, it might be worth it. Come on down here. Come on down here. Good boy. All right, but honestly, I've had this palette here for a while, and I'm careful with it, and it can always slip and you can drop it, but I've gotten better handling these kinds of things. Pencil, just a regular pencil, fine. Some of the fine art drawing pencils are okay. I like these Ticonderoga black. They tend to be a little bit softer than your average #2 pencil. Eraser. Let's see, where is I'm going to just check my list here and make sure. Blocks, cutting tools, ink. Yeah, so I mentioned the, so you saw the links to this. Newsprint paper, the Japanese, yeah, so the mulberry paper. My preference for paper. Japanese papers are meant to be printed by hand. And so I prefer, mulberry is just it's a variety of fiber. I think it's a variety of kozo fiber. This one, I'm not even sure what this is. I got this in a pad that someone gave to me. It's very, very thin. But it prints well. It prints well by hand. So I think this, like the pack of the Japanese mulberry paper on the list, that'll work well. Tracing paper, I got some tracing paper that I'm going to use very soon to show you how to do a transfer onto a block. Yeah, masking tape, marker, like a Sharpie or similar marker, those are good to have. Gloves, optional. Vegetable oil. So yeah, so here's the thing with the oil-based inks. You don't need solvent to clean them up. There. So with oil-based inks, you don't need solvent to clean them up. A little bit of vegetable oil. Which I have in a just like old like soap container. That stuff. So the vegetable oil will cut through oil-based ink, no problem. And so I'll demonstrate how I do that when I do the print demo. And then all of that will clean up with soap and water. And so there's really, when I started doing printmaking in school, things were pretty, well, it was very solvent heavy. We used kerosene to clean most things. And the kerosene is really overkill. It's just what everybody always used, and for decades, nobody questioned it. And finally, people made this, somebody with an understanding of chemistry came along and said like, hey, you don't really need to use kerosene. You could use any kind of oil, like the cheapest vegetable oil at the supermarket. We'll drizzle it on there. It'll break down the oil and the ink, and there you go. Excuse me. Okay. Now, one thing I wanted to show you, if you have a like a piece of this linoleum and you want to cut it. First of all, maybe I should ask, are there any questions about the supplies? Okay. Anytime you have any questions as I'm going through this stuff, you can just speak up and just say, hey, I got a question. And I will do my best to answer. All right, so let's say I want to cut this piece of linoleum. Well, linoleum is very dense. And some of the stuff I've noticed, when you buy it, sometimes it's like really seems kind of brittle and dry. It'll work. So what I'm going to do, I'll just cut this in half. It's about it's a little short of 8. We'll go 16th short there. 16th short there. Grab my cutting mat. So utility knife works well because the blades are a little bit thicker and a little bit more rigid, but you can do it with a regular craft knife, X-Acto or Excel brand. And there you guys are. Score it multiple times. I just cut through. I cut through. Enough times that I can break it. I want to cut the surface enough that I get a nice, like a smooth edge on there. I don't want it to be ragged when I fold it. And then you cut through the burlap. There you go. So if you're new to this, I don't recommend starting with anything terribly ambitious. One of the things, going through this process from start to finish, where you have an image, you get the image onto the block, you cut the block, you print the block, that is going to tell you a lot about how this process works. And your second one is where where you might just decide, now that you know what you're doing, the second one might be where you try something a little more ambitious. I'm going to stand up so I get better leverage. There. There. Okay. Just hold the straight edge firmly. Don't press too hard. Don't try to cut through in one stroke. As you know, in many different classes, you let the blade do the cutting. If you're trying to force it, trying to cut something by using all your might, then you don't have the right blade, or your blade's dull. All right, there we go. So cutting, just be patient and careful, and you can cut through this stuff no problem. Sharp blade, if you change, if you get one of these, change the blade. Or if you've got it and it's the size you want, then great. Then you don't need to worry about cutting it. Okay, so let's say there are different ways I can do this. If if
I have a question.
Yes.
The linoleum that I bought, is on a piece of wood. So should I take it back and get one that's not on a piece of wood?
Not necessarily. I think that I prefer, like working at home, I prefer using these, but there's nothing wrong with the linoleum. It actually, there's an advantage in it having a more stable surface to
Mhm.
sit on. And if you don't need to cut it, then I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay.
Hmm. Although, what I find is when I'm cutting, this might make a difference. When I'm cutting, I have my hand resting on the table here.
Yeah.
And if it's raised, it's not quite, I mean, it's actually, it's not bad. It's not that raised. It's not so high up. And if you've got it on the rubbery stuff, so I guess I would say you might have a little more control if you have the unmounted.
Okay, well, I can take it back and get the other kind.
Okay, if it's not if it's not too much of a problem, then I think it might make a little bit of a difference for you. Okay, paper. Now I can do this. Let's see this drawer. All right, so if you want to make a drawing and you want it to be the size of your block, you can just do this. Ta-da, same size. Like, and I'm doing this as if I'm doing this for transferring, or I'm just trying to work out, um, a design, I don't necessarily need it to be a great piece of paper. If you've already got a piece of a drawing done, then you can take the trace. I'll show you how to do this. So 2 ways to do this. I could just draw right on the block with graphite. It's like soft pencil. This is a 4B pencil. This is that Ticonderoga. And I can see that pretty well. Sorry, the connection must be a little glitchy, but I can draw. You could, spend some time drawing on the block, just straight on the block, and make it very exact, or you can make it fairly precise. Like that. And then I might take a marker once I get my drawing, and I can erase. If I want to correct something. Once I get it the way I want it, if you like, you can use the marker and draw so that it's all very clear. these, this Sharpie is getting a little old and it's getting a little bit, the point's getting a little soft. And so a newer one or a finer point Sharpie might also be helpful. I usually use the drawing on the block as a guide and a suggestion, but once I start cutting, things often change. Like I won't necessarily just do this exactly. If I have some errant cuts, it wouldn't matter that much as long as I'm keeping to, like, this is a darker surface, that's a medium surface, that's a lighter surface. I'd probably darken this all out here, just not cut anything there. If you have any, like, let's say I'm just going to do this idea. So I've done this with students where I have them, when I've taught this to college students, I will often put them through this like an exercise and say, draw a cube with light and shadow. I've been like this ever since I was an undergraduate. I liked drawing things inaccurately because I thought it was more interesting. But I'll make this more accurate just so you can see that I, in fact, do know how to draw a little bit. Not that it's always, true, like, accurate representation with the introduction of photography and then what the French Impressionists did going back to the 1860s. Once all that started happening, precise representation in drawing and painting and sculpture became less important. And so when I was an undergraduate, I liked drawing and distorting still life and the figure because it was more fun. And at some point, one professor made me demonstrate to him that I actually did know how to draw something accurately. And it was close enough, and he said, okay, fine, you can just keep doing what you're doing then, because clearly you're enjoying yourself. So I appreciated that he was willing to let me go. So let's say I've got this. If I can do like some drawings where I'm shading, and if I'm doing this, if I want to just, I like this as an exercise with this cube because I will try to create the appearance. This is all, if you're using black ink, it's all either black or white, black ink on white paper. I want to make this surface look like it's darker than this surface and this surface look like it's lightest.
I have another question.
Yes.
What if you don't know how to draw? I don't know how to draw.
What's the last thing that you have drawn?
I don't draw.
I would suggest pattern. Let's try this. Oops. So here, if you want to do pattern design is a big part, as I mentioned, woodcut, relief printmaking and pattern design and decorative arts. They've been with each other for a long time. So if I make I'm going to grid this, I'll do one. even increments there. One, two, three. Let's just get that. Okay. So there are, going back to ancient cultures, pretty much every every civilization uses like really basic geometric pattern. Okay.
Yeah.
That's not bad. I can also, if I want, I want this, I'm going to put some like smaller rectangles here. I got some smaller triangles here. I'll measure halfway, half inch, half inch, half inch, half inch, half inch. Let's see. Hmm. Oh, I kind of like it so far. Now, when you're cutting, these could, like some of this instead, like if I say I want this to be dark, I'm thinking of like, positive and negative, like what's positive, what's negative. Let's say that's dark, that's going to be light, this will be dark in here. And why not? Let's just do another. Half, half. There we go. What do you think of that?
Pretty good.
And you can see how you can break it down really quickly and really easily.
Okay.
So I would suggest that. And once you, like, if you have this square grid, like these are just 1x1 grid squares,
Mhm.
you could make this like, just like meandering designs all over the place. I suggest, like, if you look up geometric pattern design on the internet or in books, you will find enough information that there's no way you could get through all of it.
Well, do they But then I don't think I'd be allowed to use their patterns though. Would I? I don't think so.
Oh, if you look at, if you know something that's, you know, if you look at like the ancient Egyptians, there is a ton of pattern that they used. They were they're known for, the stuff that they're known for is like the bigger stuff, the hieroglyphics, their stylization of the figure, in profile, like sort of like frontal or profile. But they produced a lot of beautiful geometric pattern. They have pattern based on the lotus pattern that suggests like the Nile River was very important. So if you just looked at like ancient Egyptian pattern, that's copyright free.
Oh,
And
is it?
yes, and really, in the arts, if you're not making this for a commercial purpose,
Hmm.
you can look at somebody else's work and copy it and try it out.
Okay.
It's yeah, that's really like that's fair use. When I was in school, I mean, I made I had an entire semester where just it was like in a printmaking class where I made copies of woodcuts from art history, and it was very useful and very interesting. And you know, that's just sort of I guess it's kind of a given that we do that kind of stuff because you have to learn. You've got to learn from somebody, and you can learning from previous examples is very, very useful. So let's say I've got this and I want to transfer this to my block here. The reason for the tracing paper, I'll get this bigger piece. So here, when you transfer to the block, the drawing that you're transferring from has to go face down onto the block because when you print, it reverses. So be aware that anything that is cut into the block is going to be reversed when you print. So if you have any text will need to be drawn and cut backwards. But here, I want to be able to see through the drawing so I can line it up well. And I can't see through this paper, but I can see through this stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tape this down. Roberta, is there a particular, is there, can you like identify some artwork that you enjoy looking at?
I'm a nature person. I really am.
Okay.
That's what I am. So, and I for my artwork, I use a lot of my own photography because I think it's pretty good.
Okay.
And but I'm just a nature person,
Okay.
and so landscapes and I love the solar system. Oh,
Mm,
that is just
yes.
that's my thing, the solar system.
So that, I mean, it's good to know. I mean, are you keeping track of the Mars rover and the helicopter they're going to try to launch soon?
No, to me that's junky. What I like is when they do when they have these eclipses that only happen every 700 years.
Oh
And
yeah.
so, and I actually saw one of those a couple of years ago. It
Mhm.
was fascinating. But then See, what happens is, this last eclipse that happened,
Hmm.
they have so many beautiful photographs, images, photographs of it in the paper. I just cut them out,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
But I think, I'm not into that space, I could care less for that space stuff and the Mars rover and that.
All right.
Doesn't interest me.
Yeah, I'm curious to see. Um, but yeah, some of the just outer space planets, like what's happening, like just different phenomena that happen in space.
Oh yeah, yeah, because they had recently when Jupiter and Saturn, those two gas giants were
That's
close.
cool.
That kind of stuff fascinates me.
Yeah, that is cool.
Oh, but I didn't get any pictures of that. Did you?
No, I got to see it, but I didn't.
Was it-
I didn't have any camera to do that.
But I was thinking I was going to get one in the paper, but I didn't see anything in the paper. Maybe I got to look it up online or something.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some good pictures online.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff I like. I don't care about all this junk they send up there.
Okay. Well, okay. So I'm going to transfer this. Now this is I mean, it's not really a symmetrical image, but let's just say that it matters to me that I get this to print the way I drew it. And to get it to print the way I draw it, I have to transfer the drawing face down on the block. So I need paper that I can see through so that I can line it up with the block. So I'm going to trace it in pencil on the front side. I'm using just like it's a soft #2 pencil. If you have drawing, like the fine art drawing pencils, like a 4B pencil would work really well for this because you want the softer graphite will transfer nicely to the block. All right, I'll make sure that's nice and soft there. Good. Make sure that's like that. Great. So I don't need any more. This one. So that's right side up. This down. Okay. I've got it lined up here. If it's if it's a more detailed drawing, I might make a tape loop and stick the block so it won't move, and then I can put this down. I could tape the paper to the table. I don't know that I'm going to need to do that with this relatively simple drawing. I have too much paper here. Okay, so line this up. So the graphite with pressure will transfer to the surface of the linoleum. Now, I could have just done all of this drawing on the block. But sometimes you work on a drawing on paper and you didn't work, you didn't make it on, if you didn't draw it on the block, you've got it on a piece of paper, you don't have to just try to recreate it on the block. You can trace it. Transfer. So I can also like do this. I can't, I mean, I don't have to count on just like hitting my line all the way perfectly.
So I have another question.
Yes.
If I saw one of those patterns that I liked, I
Mhm.
wouldn't have, I could just trace it and that's all I would do?
Yep. Yeah, you can just, as long as it's the right size, then you can trace it.
Okay.
Now, if you've got it, like if it's not the right size, then, you can just work out your own drawing. Which is, that's something that, shouldn't be too difficult. And then, and there also are like designs, with some like design companies, or like, you can find pattern books with different designs. A lot of the ancient stuff, stuff from like really like ancient cultures is just, that's something that's like free to use. All right, let's see. That's not bad. So I think I got enough of this. And if I wanted to keep it from smudging, let's get, I think that's a better one. I'll use this. Where's my, it's right here, right in front of me. All right, so I could have just put the grid on the linoleum. In this case, but it's nice to be able, it's nice to know how to do this transfer. Mm-hmm. Almost there. So I find, so the two things, the pencil, if you leave just the pencil, when you're cutting it, when you print it, you're gonna rub the drawing off. You'll just like, wipe the drawing away. These, The solvent for this Sharpie marker is alcohol. And if you're using water-based, like the Caligo resin-based inks or oil-based inks, you're not going to do anything to this. So even after, like, if you cut a little bit, print it, clean the ink off, you'll still see your drawing. That's why I recommend having the marker there. Okay. Good. So now, cutting.
Would you explain again what the glass piece is for? I didn't understand that.
Oh, so the glass piece is for inking.
Oh,
When you print them, you have to roll ink out with the roller.
uh,
And what you want to do is like get a very thin, dense coating of ink on the roller surface, and you do that by rolling it out on the glass first.
oh.
So you put your ink out on the glass, and then you pick it up with that.
So does that where the vegetable oil comes in to clean that glass?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yes, I'll show you. I'll demonstrate when we print next week. I'll show you what that looks like. Hey, are you upstaging me again? Oh, little baby, come here. You gotta sit right here. You can't sit on the table. Okay, cutting with, yeah. See, this is what I get for being permissive for so long. He thinks he can go everywhere. Okay. So I wanted to have, I can even just like, say this is going to be dark, 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 just so I don't get going and forget and cut like, cut into some of this. Like I want to leave this solid. So if I want to make this like a clear, just like cut this clear out here, 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 I will use, I can start by cutting with this. And just go right along this edge. So, safety in cutting says always cut away from yourself. And if I'm holding the block like this to stabilize it and I'm cutting toward my finger, that's a mistake. And sooner or later, you will pay for that mistake. And it hurts. So don't. This is, you will develop strong fingers when you do this, because like I'm always like just kind of like pinching it here. This helps to keep it from skidding. Hmm? Better glasses on. So if you're trying something simple for this first print, if I make thinner cuts along the edge, then I can take the larger, wider gouge and clear that out. All right. So you can see the way the cutting works. It's like these little depressions and little ridges on the edge of of each of the cuts. And if I cut in between them there, good. And sometimes it just takes me a minute to find the right angle. And then once I have it, I can get through this a little bit faster. But this is, you know, if you're new to this, I think it'll make your fingers tired. There you go. So cut right on the edge of that. Cut this up to there. And you know, when you're cutting, like I'm cutting into that corner. One way that you cut is you like cut and like you kind of like gently come out of it. So the tool, you can see the back of the tool, if it's more raised at first to get in, and then I lower it and the tool comes out. And it creates this like tapered. You can see it's a little hard to see that. There's a little bit more like a tapered line. It's thinner than wider than thinner. You can also, like when cutting up to that corner, this is why I thought of this. You know, if you're going to cut right up to an edge, like let's say I'm cutting, I want to do like a pattern. I want to just like cut horizontal cuts and then stop and draw the tool back. I can do this and just cut, get like just like a flat end on the cut. Like that. And it takes a little bit of practice. You start to get better at being able to gauge, like when you put the tool down, where the point is. Sometimes at first you put the point down, you start cutting, and you're not where you thought you were. I think that's just a matter of getting to know the tools and having that experience with them. There. So, something like this can create a different like appearance of shading. That's kind of cool. I'm gonna do some more cutting to clean this out. Oh, yeah. Hey, baby, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're blocking the light a little bit. Hey, dear child, come here. Good boy. Stay right there. Mm. Okay, so get your little butt up a little farther. Thank you. Good point. Okay. You are so in the light, Elliot. Okay. Okay, getting into this corner with the U-gouge. So this is a U-gouge, and you can see that U shape to it. It's a kind of a flat U-gouge. I can't really get into this corner with it. So now I could, if I'm just clearing that out, I can come at it from the side like that. And if I already have this cut with the thinner tool, I can just kind of cut right up to it. I also can turn it like a little bit on its side and just use the corner of the tool and put it in there. Okay, so like, cutting, so like I have this like really sharp cut right here. I made a cut with this thinner gouge, which really makes kind of like a little wall right there. And then to clear this, I can cut up to it. You can kind of hear it like hit that there. This is also a place where you can use a knife. Just this tool. I know the speedball set comes with a little knife attachment. If I just like cut down, this is just like cutting straight down to make a deep cut, and then I can cut right into it. I don't think anybody can see. Move, please, sweetheart. Over here. Okay, okay. There's a mouse under there, Elliot. You're so cute in the morning. Hey. Okay. So this is getting pretty deep here. It's maybe a little deeper than I need, but if I want to have a really clear edge, then better to have it a little too deep than a little too shallow. Okay. Okay. Honey bunch, you cannot sit there in front of the camera. I'm sorry. Okay. In there, I want to be careful.
Duffy,
Yes.
how deep do your cuts need to be?
That's a good question. I don't know the measurement of the depth of it. Let's see. Well, considering that, so the printed, this is going to be the surface that gets printed right here. And you roll ink over it. And as long as this, as long as the roller doesn't get down into this area, then it's deep enough. So if this is wider, then it's probably gotta be a little bit deeper. If it's not
Right.
that wide, then it doesn't have to be too deep.
Yeah, so it depends. I mean, you just got to think about the roller going over it as
Yeah.
to whether ink is going to get into there or not. And
Yes,
the wider it is, the deeper you probably need to be.
yeah. There. So that, so like this area that's being cut doesn't have to look pretty if I want this to just be cleared out. So I got some uneven, little bit of uneven depth. At some point, I would probably just like look at it and decide, I'm going to print it and see if I need to cut any more out. Because if it's done, I don't need to just keep cutting and spend my time on that. It's not a very good use of your time. Okay. Okay, good. Good. Okay. So that's like a little bit of mark making. You can, if you want to use the mark that's made by the gouge, you can. So like that. That might be enough right there. If I need to define this edge. It's not bad. Okay. I think we have enough time for me to demonstrate how I would print this. I think it would might help you to see, I guess, to contextualize what I'm doing here. So you will make a little bit of a mess with the cut off pieces. Brush them off here. Little bits and crumbs out of the ink. That's not what we want to do. Thank you. Oh, that's better. Okay, grab some ink. Sure where my black ink is, but green will do just fine. Okay, so that's the Speedball oil-based ink. And I just need a piece of paper to proof on. Have some smooth sketchbook paper. Right. My block is here. Make sure I get off of there. Extra oil on there. So I'll put a little bit of the ink out. Normally I would use black, but I think I must have put my black someplace else instead of my usual ink box. So I work it with the knife. The friction helps the ink to flow a little bit better. I don't need a lot. Oh, no, 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 no. Elliot, do not come up here right now. Sweetheart, not a good time. No, honey, no. No, no, no. He thinks we're playing. Little baby, go over there. Thank you so much. Chair. Okay. That's plenty there. I think I might need to put a little bit more out. Okay. All right. Good. Good. So I want to, just a strip, a little ribbon of ink up here.
Hey, Duffy,
Yes.
a quick question. So I can't tell if it was on my screen or if I saw this correctly. I've not worked with oils before, but it almost looked like maybe it was separated just a tiny bit. So is that part of what you're doing? And okay, so really working it to be consistent.
Yes. So yeah, so there was some separation. Some of the oil separated, and so I want to mix it to just get that all mixed together.
Got it.
Yeah, and it also, like when it's coming out of a tube or a can, it's generally like a little bit like it's generally a little bit stiffer. And using the knife to sort of like work the ink and create some friction and makes it flow a little bit better. Okay, so just a little bit.
What is the other tool you're using besides the other one? What you roll it, the roller?
So this is the tool with like the roller with the handle is called a brayer.
Okay.
And this is like the Speedball brand. You know, you can, Speedball makes a lot of stuff that is like a little bit like more affordable. And the brayer, the soft rubber brayer is the thing that they make that is like, it's actually very good. You can spend more money on brayers, and the Speedball rubber, like a soft rubber brayer will usually be everything you need. So I got like this like really like thin but dense coating of ink on it.
And are the brayers different sizes, or are they generally the same?
You can buy different widths of brayer. You can buy them like this is, that's 4 inches wide. You can buy them like a 1/2 inch wide, 1 inch wide, 2, 6, 8. So the 4-inch brayer is good because it's pretty flexible in what you can do with it. You can roll up a smaller block. You can also roll up a larger one. So this looks like this ink might have separated. It looks awfully transparent, but that's okay. All right. So I go over this in rolling it. You go over it multiple times carefully. If you have like an extra piece of the rubber stuff and you put it down on that, then you can roll it and it won't slide around on you so much. It's just that you should have one separate for like this. Yep, like, you know, just make sure it's like, you know, so like you can have like a separate one that you can get ink on. Okay, and you can see there's a little bit of linoleum chunk right there that came off of something. All right, I think I've got it. So what I see, you can see like the that the ink kind of glistens on the surface. You don't want it to be like overly textured. But if you don't get that sort of glistening surface, then you probably don't have enough on it. Okay, so now I'm going to print, and to print, I need to remove, like, don't print on the surface. Don't print where you're inking. So if you have a larger table, I have to keep, if I were doing this myself, I would, if I weren't showing you this with like, if I didn't need this camera, I would have my ink over to one side and my printing area on another area of the table. So I would keep my inking area separate. That way it's a lot harder for me to get ink on my paper that I want to print on. So here, and this is just going to be like for proofing. Here you can use a piece of newsprint paper. You can use a piece of the Japanese paper. Put that there. Press it. Make it stick. And you like hit that and make it slide, which is not what I wanted to do. So pressure on the back.
Is that newsprint you're using or Japanese mulberry?
This is actually just a piece of smooth sketchbook paper.
Oh. Well, so right now, you talked earlier about the Japanese paper, mulberry, and then you mentioned newsprint, and so now you're using something else. So what is it that was?
Well, the There, that's actually, that was a little bit over inked. But that's still, that's okay. That's, yeah. So for, for proofing, like a state proof is when you work on the block and you're not sure exactly what you have. And the best way to know for sure is to print it. And so you get a print of it in that state. In terms of like what you print on, newsprint is convenient because it's a cheap paper. And I grabbed a piece of sketchbook paper because it was a little bit more convenient to get it out of my drawer.
Okay.
So I don't mean to throw that off too much by using a different kind of paper. But so this, you can see the relationship between what I cut and how it printed. And so some of this, a little bit of this where like you can see the different kind of marks made by the tools. This is cleaned out clean. So that was deep enough. And when I clean this off, I will grab a rag. Actually, something that I can do here. If I want to work on this more and cut the block more, I can, but I want to get that excess ink, off the surface. One way you can do that is to start by taking a piece of newsprint and print it as if you're trying to get a print, but you're really just trying to strip the extra ink off of it. In this case, I over inked this, so there's plenty of ink there. You can see I still have a little ink coming off. But I know people who do printmaking, and rather than use like the vegetable oil or a solvent to clean the block off, they just take a rag and wipe it like that, which can work because then you don't have to clean oil off the block.
But if you were gonna use black ink the next time, would that be problematic?
What's that?
If you're gonna use black ink the next time, would it be problematic that you're not cleaning it?
Not with this, because the black ink is going to dominate any color.
Mhm.
If I used black and then I had residue of black and I wanted to use a light color like yellow, I would need to make sure that I wash it off really thoroughly. In which case, I would do this. I'll show you the vegetable oil, like magic. Just put a little bit on there. We'll cut that oil-based ink really well. It's going to leave a little residue of the oil, but I'll go to a clean spot on the rag. Just a sec, Joe. Oh, let's see.
This with this class, these classes, are we gonna learn how to use a color other than black or just black?
If you want me to teach you a little bit about using color, I'll be happy to.
Yeah.
Yeah, the basic, I mean, basic stuff, there's a long tradition in printmaking of just black and white images.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that you have to stick with that. Yeah, so you can see the vegetable oil really picked all that up. And you could use just like, I used to like wash my blocks in the sink when I was a student, and they get wet and then you let them dry and then they're fine. You could use like a spray cleaner. I use Mrs. Meyer's cleaners, and that stuff will pick up the residue of that. Let me go grab one. Okay. There. That is nice and clean. There. There, all gone. And if there's a little bit of residue of green, then no, or ink, when it dries, it's not going to affect what comes after. It's not going to affect what comes after, unless you are like, if you proof this in black, and then you decided, oh wait, I want to print it in yellow. If you don't clean it really, really well, even any residue of black ink is going to make the yellow start to turn green. So just be careful. So there. Yeah, this is really over inked. I couldn't quite tell, but because this ink was so transparent, I just put too much ink on it. I don't use this green very often. Yeah. So what do you think of that? You think you could start a print?
Yeah. I mean, it seems, like even a good test to sort of figure out some textures and things like that, even if it's not a figurative drawing.
Yeah. So let me, yeah, and if you have, just a moment here, where is that? Oh, you come here. To show you.
It seems like starting small to begin is probably a good idea.
It is. And really, I think that the first print that you do from start to finish will help you to understand what you like, kind of like what you do with it. And I want to show you
What size is that? What size is the print you just did?
4 by 5.
Okay.
Now here, so one of my favorite artists is the German artist Käthe Kollwitz. She was mostly a printmaker, and I really love her woodcuts. I think her drawing is tremendous. And you can see, just like you can see, like knowing what the process is, there's an efficiency with how she cut this. And so you can see all of the white is where she cut away, and the black is just the surface of the wood that was printed. There's also old favorite Elizabeth Catlett.
Didn't she just die recently?
Um,
Yeah, she did.
looks like 2012. Yes.
Oh, I didn't know it was that long ago, but I know I read about her when she died.
Yeah. But this one here, this is a famous woodcut of hers. Is it wood or linoleum? I think it's wood.
Mhm.
Well, anyway, would you look at that? That is beautiful.
It is.
That's
And you can see where she's like on the left side where she creates the edge of the hat only with contrast. So the background is cut more and lighter, and then the underside of the brim of the hat is darker with just a few cuts to show the weave of the hat. And that's just control. And you can see just seeing the demos that I did, you can almost you can see the tool that she used because you have one. Not that you have you might not have this control. She was Elizabeth Catlett after all, but it's if you look up artists, so yes, I think she's a good person to know about. She was very good. Oh, no. So looking at artists is important, and just seeing often even like with anything where it's like light and dark, this is not, this is earlier, not the same. Where was that? I wanted to see that woodcut. There we go. So this is a different, I mean, like stylistically, this looks different than the first one of hers that we looked at. You're trying to create contrast, and you're creating contrast only with, if you're printing black ink on white paper, it's just, the amount that you're cutting is what governs the light and shadow and the degree to which you have shadow or texture. Texture is a really, just like you can see the different cutting of the seat, and then her jacket gives you this the appearance of different surfaces. So that her coat is really beautifully cut. And this is also, printmaking was always often used by artists who are making like social justice. Artists have always been involved in social justice. Not all of us, but some of us, always somewhere, because we can make images that are powerful, that communicate a message without the need, really without the need for words. Sometimes in this case, there is, an important text, but going back to the beginnings of I took a history of printmaking course, and it focused on European traditions, and Martin Luther in the Protestant Reformation, he employed the artist Lucas Cranach to make a series of woodcuts that were very clearly anti-Pope. Like one of them was the Pope riding backwards on a donkey with a spiral of poop on his head. And most people couldn't read, but they could understand that picture very, very well. So, images are powerful, and, you can make multiple copies of these. So you can, you could print, dozens, hundreds, and get them into the hands of a lot of different people that need to see them. So, if you do a search for woodcut, you're going to find a lot of stuff, and probably more than you'd have time to get through. But there are folk traditions that use woodcut. There are people have used woodcuts for commercial purposes. And nowadays, woodcut is in the hands of the artists, and the artists use it to create, this really like obsolete, like graphic arts media that's used in the service of fine arts. Just like lithography.
What was the, you mentioned the wood material that you could do a woodcut with. What was that again?
Oh, it's called Sheena plywood. It's sold through McLean's. And if we do this company, they're out of Portland. McLean's Printmaking Supplies. So they're on the West Coast. They're very much connected to the tradition of Japanese printmaking.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have a lot of stuff that is like a modern Japanese woodcut practice. If you look over here to blocks and plates, you'll see Sheena plywood, and it comes in two different thicknesses. If it's a smaller, like a blocks on the smaller size, the 1/4-inch Sheena is great. And if you've got larger, I wouldn't use the 3/8 unless I'm making a larger one, like 12 by 16 or bigger.
So I guess we're learning on linoleum because it's much easier than wood.
It's easier to get. It's a little less expensive. It can be easier to cut. It's a little more forgiving in terms of like not having a grain that you cut against.
Oh, okay.
But the Sheena plywood, with decent tools, you can cut across the grain pretty well, actually very well.
What do you use for relief?
Mostly I use wood. Actually, my favorite of all time is cherry. Let me.
That's wood?
Yeah, so this is a plank of cherry. Right here, you can see that it's just like a plank of wood. And I've got a drawing. So the way I did this, I drew with pencil, and then I inked it with a marker, and then I've been cutting. I've got a lot of cutting to do on this. It's
What do you use to cut? The same tools that we do?
Yep, same tools.
Oh yeah.
Yep. So this
What is it supposed to be?
Oh, well, it's an old stone incinerator down by the riverside, but it's got some more work to do for cutting to make it clearer.
Oh.
So, like some of the cutting in the landscape is a little. I think I need to have some bigger areas of, bigger areas of just like light. So,
How big is that?
what are the dimensions of this? This is 12 by 11. And I'm just using this because this is a piece, like this is the end of a board and there's a knot right here. And this area right here is very hard to cut. So plank grain wood like this, just like a board, a good piece of cherry is really nice to cut. It's hard, but you can get a lot of really good detail with cherry. I've tried using harder woods like maple and they're really hard to cut. They dull your tools really fast and it's just, there's a lot of effort. Softer woods like basswood are also good. McLean sells basswood blocks. That's also a good wood. It's a little softer than this. You can't get quite as much detail as you can get with cherry. But like there are different hardwood suppliers, and you used to be able to go to them, like Wood World in Chicago, and like they would have like ends of boards cut off that were just like little remnants, and they'd sell them to you for, pretty minimal fee. But they stopped doing that a few years ago. But that's my old undergraduate professor used to take us to, he used to take us to a hardwood supply place in Michigan and to say, pick out some wood and bring it back to the studio and we'll make woodcuts. So so we're at the end of tonight's session. What I'd like you to do is, spend some time either drawing, getting an image onto a block and cutting. And next week, what we'll do is we'll do some more cutting and some more printing and answer questions, and it'll be helpful for you. It's kind of hard for you to know exactly what questions to ask if you haven't done anything. So you'll just, if you do a little bit of stuff between now and next week, then we can get push your images along.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Duffy.
Yeah, and if you have questions over the course of the week, please let me know.
Okay,
Will do.
thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.